Hello, YouTube. I'm back. For how long? I don't know, but let's enjoy it while we can. I left because life got busier, and one of my leisure activities simply had to go. And this was the one. Nothing has really changed in my life since then, so keeping this up long term probably isn't sustainable, but let's just see where this goes. The topic of today's video is Sargon of Akkad. I've made videos about or involving him in the past, and he's interesting to me because he was one of the first people I subscribed to when I made this account. This was way back close to when he first started, and it's fascinating how much he seems to have changed. This was especially jarring to me because I've been away for several months, and I've come back to find, well, let's talk about that. The story goes, Sargon appeared on Andy Worski's stream to debate white nationalist Richard Spencer. I haven't watched this stream, mostly because from what I've heard, it was basically a clusterfuck. The key thing I kept hearing, though, was that Sargon did a very poor job arguing with Spencer. Now, I don't know if that's actually true, but I've personally never seen Sargon perform well in a live debate, so it seems pretty believable to me. In any case, whether he did poorly or not, that idea is out there. That he just got blown the fuck out by some white nationalists on a stream. So, what is his response to this? I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I've put a link below if you want to watch it. He begins by talking about how he is a representative of more than just himself. That he's not just a content creator, and that he didn't consider this in the debate. That's a very odd way of saying that he didn't do as good a job as he should have, and it's also not a very humble attitude, to say the least. It really speaks to how big his ego has gotten over the years that he genuinely sees himself this way. I mean, I can understand that if you're a big content creator, you would feel some sort of responsibility to your audience. I mean, I'm a tiny content creator and I feel some responsibility to my audience. I understand that aspect of it. But to talk about it that way, it's sort of like intelligence. It's one thing to be smart. It's another thing to publicly state how smart you are. But anyways, that's a side issue here. I'm not going to try to psychoanalyze Sargon and his ego issues too much. I'll leave that to other people. I want to focus on the real content of his video. So he goes on to say,
I'm certainly being treated as the figurehead of something, even if nobody can define it and our enemies would describe it as
skeptic community.
I've never liked this label, firstly because it represents only a reaction to something else, and secondly because it means we are allowing our enemies to define us.
Okay, remember this. It will be important later. But okay, fair enough. He doesn't like the label skeptic community. And I've heard it used by all sorts of people, but since enemies is such a nebulous term anyway, maybe all those people are his enemies. For the record, I never liked the label skeptic community, but mostly because it sounds so superior and pretentious, as if no other group is skeptical of things, or that this group is any more skeptical of things than anyone else.
However, having a large group of independent-minded individualists agree on a label that will encompass a specific set of core beliefs is difficult. Frankly, I don't know what to choose.
Why is this needed? Why does a large group of independent-minded individualists even need a label at all? If everyone is independent-minded and adheres to individualism, I hardly think labels are needed or even really desirable.
I'm not worried about how the enemies of liberalism will view it, or what they'll try to do with it.
Remember this too, it might become relevant again.
But I am concerned that we have been resting on our laurels for far too long, and we need to start organizing. The iron law of activism is that while you do nothing, nothing will change.
I have an issue with this so-called iron law of activism. Change is constant. Everything is changing for all sorts of reasons. Social change happens all the time and is not always caused by activism. Sargon can cause change by doing exactly what he's been doing, making videos pointing out stupidity and arguing against ideas and people who hold them. You don't need to use activism to cause social change.
The highly organised, well-funded and deeply entrenched power structure of the extreme left will continue to subsume the institutions of our countries within its ideological sphere of influence.
And you're going to beat them at that game? Good luck.
I am so sick and tired of people saying, well, ragging on bedroom feminists is so passé. Well, yes, which is why people don't do it. But I don't know whether anyone is paying attention, but the far left is making power grab after power grab, consuming more and more of our once liberal free societies and subjugating them to their dogmatic racial and gendered planning.
You don't know if anyone is paying attention? If they're not paying attention, why are they subscribed to you? And why are they watching your videos? I suppose your goal is to reach and convince people who wouldn't normally want to watch your videos? I'm not sure how you're going to achieve that, but okay.
While SJWs rack up victory after victory, we cannot even decide on a label. My concerned subscriber is right. I had not been taking this seriously, but there are serious consequences for everyone, and we must start pushing back as a united front with a way to identify one another and assert a powerful set of values, which I believe should be centered upon the individual, their rights, and respect for their personal agency.
Okay, I see how this would be a good thing. If such a group were formed, it could do some good. Doing that, though, would be very difficult, and it would need very careful planning, thought, and organization. You're not talking about a spontaneous grassroots movement here. You're talking about a proper, organized activist movement.
To identify ourselves, I recommend we choose a label and stick with it. If someone who promotes feminism is a feminist, and someone who promotes socialism is a socialist, and someone who promotes Islamism is an Islamist, and someone who promotes fascism is a fascist, then someone who promotes liberalism must be a liberalist. I say that we use this label until it's dead or we find something better.
Would you like to know more?
Wait, what happened to this?
Frankly, I don't know what to choose.
Did that change over the course of this video? You've gone from not being able to decide to choosing a label for your group of independent-minded individualists. And you want to stick to this label for as long as you can? And this is despite the fact that someone who believes in liberalism is commonly known as a liberal. I know that that word has been used by people who don't actually follow classical liberalism, but to me that says you probably shouldn't organize yourself under a label based on the term liberal at all. Think of a different term that describes your views. Maybe organize under the name of an actual organization, Classical Liberal Association or something. But to try to make up some variant of liberal is just, well, ridiculous. It's sort of like trying to choose your own nickname. But here is where it gets fun. Apparently, some people, including Mr. Medicare, aka Jim, found something particularly funny about a group of individualists forming a group under the name Liberalists. A buddy of Sargon, Louis Laveau, had Jim on to explain himself.
Okay, we should be live. So I'm here with Jim, otherwise known as Mr. Medicare, and we're just going to be talking a little bit about Sargon's video that he just put out earlier, where he is floating the idea of organizing. And I know, Jim, you took some real issue with what Sargon said in that. And the thing about it is that I'm not really sure what your issue is with it, and like where exactly you disagree.
Well, it wasn't an issue. I was laughing at it. That was the main thing I was doing. And my assessment on the whole liberalist thing struck me as kind of cringy, a little bit gay as fuck. So I was having a nice laugh at it.
And that's all you really need to know about Jim's position on this. Louis and then later Sargon, who got on the stream, try to convince Jim that Sargon's activist group is a good idea. They then try to tell Jim that he believes the same things that they do. And they actually seem to get quite bothered that he isn't agreeing with them. I, for one, was laughing my ass off while watching this, Because there's only one thing you need to know about Mr. Metokur.
I'm an internet troll.
See, he's not interested in your serious ideas. He wants to have a laugh. He wants to get a reaction out of you. He seems to care, yes, about exposing liars and hypocrites and con artists and such, but he's basically the exact opposite of an activist, and trying to convince him to join your activist group or to become a leader is frankly idiotic. As the stream went on and it became very clear that Jim was just fucking with these guys, it got really surreal because Sargon and Louis were getting genuinely upset because Jim wasn't taking their activism as seriously as they do. But that's not why I want to go through the stream. It makes it really funny to watch, but I want to focus on other things. In the stream, we actually get to hear Sargon talking more about this liberalist idea and why he's doing it. So let's have a listen.
Like, should we just let the SJWs carry on unopposed? Because it'd be.
Oh my God,
cool.
Sargon! Yeah, we need the freedom fighter of Sargon of Akkad to go win the West for the world.
We don't.
Without
then.
you,
Are you saying
without you, we'll be in
everything's going
shackles,
great against
Sargon.
social justice, buddy?
Without you, we'll be in shackles. We need you to save us.
Probably
This
not.
weak and
Hopefully
stupid is
it'll
the
be
greatest
someone else.
weaponization
No, but
against SJW.
That's the thing.
ever.
At least he wants to do something, and that's all I think is something. It's all I'm recognizing here is that he's one of the few people that actually wants to try something, and I'm like, good, let's do it. Like, what's
That's
wrong with that?
great. And
That-
like
that'd
I
be
said,
fun.
I find it funny how he's going about it, and I find the name to be funny.
It's the only one I could think of. I mean, it logically makes sense, and it's not already taken. So,
Why didn't you go with individualist?
because it's a description of what a liberal is. It's a component of liberalism.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Well,
don't think
I mean,
no, Jim,
liberalist is a bit on the nose, isn't it?
honestly, when someone who understands political philosophy explains to you why, like, being shocked that a group of individualists can form a group, you're going to feel really dumb.
Okay, this is the first part. Sargon's reaction to Jim finding the name funny is to tell him how wrong he is and explain why he chose the name. But he's missing the point. If you need to understand political philosophy for a name to not be funny, then it's probably not a good name for your activist group. And listen to the tone Sargon uses when he's reacting to someone finding the name funny. He's obviously not very happy about it. And it's getting a big reaction. So now everyone who wants to troll Sargon knows exactly how to do it. Just make fun of the name. Okay, so the next section after this is Sargon trying to convince Jim that Jim already agrees with him. Then we get to...
And
That's
what
why we have to
people
talk about
are you disagreeing with? Because you talked about your enemies in that video. So who are your
The
enemies?
SJWs and the alt-right. Any
So the alt,
collectivists.
okay, wait, no. So the alt-right is your enemy.
Yeah. Have you not looked at the way they treat me?
This is apparently how Sargon determines who his enemies are. How they treat him. Not their beliefs, not their values, the way they treat other people in general. No, the way they treat him. And yet he refers to them as, quote, our enemies. He wants to form an activist group to fight these enemies. But he seems to base this entirely on himself and how people treat him. I mean, am I his enemy for having made this video? Does it then follow that I am an enemy of all liberalists? Is that how this works?
Oh, okay, fantastic. Now let's get back to my question. You said you're going to counter SJWs, but the alt-right is also your enemy. So what are you going to do to counter them?
Nothing. They're irrelevant.
So if they're irrelevant, why are they counted amongst your enemies?
Because they're people who oppose me.
This just emphasizes the issue I have with this. If his activist movement was actually based on principles, he would be actively opposing anyone who holds principles in opposition to his own. Instead, it seems to all be based on who opposes him personally.
Oppose you or liberalism?
Me and liberalism.
Are you the group? Is it like your
I
thing?
personally am not the group.
All right, say that again. You cut out a little.
I personally am not a group, no.
No, but you said, I said you define them as our
Jim,
enemies.
I know what you're trying to do. I know that you think this is like, you think that
I'm
want
asking you
power
really
over
simple
people or
questions.
something.
You said
think
our
I want
enemies,
to be
and you
control
listed them as
something?
SJWs and alt-right. And
Yeah.
then when I said, what are you going to do to counter them? You're like, well, they're mean to me. It seems to be
No,
specific
no, I
to
didn't.
you.
I didn't say that they were mean to me after you said, what are you going to do to counter them? What I'm going to do to counter them is just advocate like they do. Hold conferences, talk to people, try and put across a set of principles that are more positive than, you know what, it's okay to say fuck white people. I think that's a good start, don't you?
This is how Sargon reacts to Jim making the same point I've just made. He dodged the question like a politician. Maybe he is meant to be an activist.
But Sargon, honestly, and I don't know if anybody else is going to tell you this, so I'm just going to tell you this honestly.
I know what you're going to say. It's cringy. I know.
No, I just think you're getting a little high off your own ego.
Yeah,
and
the
some
thing
of the
is, I
comments
would
that
agree with you if like everyone wasn't calling me the leader of something, and I was like, I'm not the leader of something. And everyone's like, yeah, you are the leader of something, and now we're going to act like you're the leader of something. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'll just be the leader of something. And everyone's like, oh, you can't do that. That's up your own ass.
First off, I love how he proves Jim's point about being high on his own ego by telling Jim he knows what he's going to say before he even says it. Second, I also enjoy his use of everyone here. Everyone told him to be a leader. Then everyone started treating him as one. And now everyone is telling him he's up his own ass. It's astounding to me that he actually thinks this way. Clearly, those everyones are not the same people. The people telling him to be a leader are not the same ones now telling him he's up his own ass. But this is his justification for trying to start an activist movement. But remember this?
I've never liked this label, firstly because it represents only a reaction to something else, and secondly because it means we are allowing our enemies to define us.
Yep, he doesn't like the term skeptic community because it's allowing our enemies to define us. Yet it's perfectly okay to use your enemies treating you as a leader as justification for becoming a leader.
I'm just doing what people are telling me that I am, and that's fine. I'd rather not do any of this. Honestly, I cannot wait to do my shitty video games. You just have no fucking idea how much that calls to me. But at the moment, I mean, I heard Louis explaining to you like the depth of the problem of SJWs, and I don't think you're ignorant of it anyway. And so you're something like acting like this is something I want to do, and it's really not.
Yep, you heard it. Sargon is being dragged, kicking and screaming by everyone who simply demanded that he become a leader and start an activist movement of liberalists. He has no choice in the matter. Please. He clearly wants to do this, or else he wouldn't be doing it. He wouldn't be doing mental gymnastics to justify him doing it if, deep down, he really didn't want to be doing this. I don't know if he's denying it to himself or just to Jim here, but this false modesty is not convincing. I can understand maybe he'd rather be playing video games or something like that, but to pretend that somehow you're being forced or coerced into becoming an activist? As if Sargon becoming an activist is the only way to save Western civilization. I mean, I don't know if Sargon is delusional here or what.
Why are you letting them pressure you into doing it?
Because it needs to be done, Jim.
And this is the crux of it. I'm not going to go through the whole rest of the stream. It's quite long, and you can go watch it if you want to. I think if you watch it from the perspective of Jim just trolling them for the entire time, it's a pretty funny video. But let's talk about that last statement by Sargon. It needs to be done. A YouTuber is going to start an activist movement because he thinks he can actually solve the problems in society through activism. Here are some of the issues I see with that. First off, he's obviously not very good with PR. He chose a name that's instantly being publicly laughed at, and his reaction to this is to go to the person laughing and try to convince them the movement is a good idea, thereby completely missing the fact that people are finding the name funny. I said earlier, successful activism of this sort requires planning and organization, and the very first step Sargon has taken has been a misstep. And we haven't even talked about the timing of the announcement. There are a lot of people out there who thinks he just got blown out in a debate with a white nationalist. Is this really the right time to try to start an activist movement focused not on the alt-right, but on the SJWs? I mean, there's a chance that because of the timing, this movement will forever be tied to that Richard Spencer debate. Now, you might say, screw PR. Gamergate didn't need PR, and it was successful in many ways. But if you said that, What you'd be missing is that Gamergate probably would have been much more successful if every mainstream news source wasn't constantly badmouthing it. Gamergate was able to survive bad PR because it was an amorphous leaderless movement. The liberalists are not that. They have a very clear leader. And this brings us to the second issue I see with the movement, which is that it is entirely too focused on Sargon. He didn't get together with a bunch of other people who agree with him and make a joint announcement. No, he made a video on his own channel, and when he talks about the movement, he talks about himself as a leader and the movement's enemies as being those who don't treat him personally well. It's basically the Sargon movement, not the liberalist movement. So, if somebody takes down Sargon, they take down the liberalists. Related to that, my third issue is how much of Sargon's audience is actually interested in taking part in liberalist activism? See, I have to imagine a lot of Sargon's viewers are just there to hear about stupidity and injustice in the world, and many of them are probably quite right-wing, if not actually alt-right. Those people probably don't want to endlessly listen to liberalist activist videos. So what happens when Sargon's channel becomes the liberalist channel with a focus on real-life activism? How long will his audience stick around? And then what happens to this movement that was based entirely on Sargon himself? See, Sargon's only power and influence comes from him having a large audience. And if that disappears, so does this movement. At this point you might ask, why do I care? Well, the answer is I don't generally care much about Sargon himself or what he does with his time. But I do care about many of the same issues Sargon intends to address with his activism. And if there's one thing I really dislike, it's when people make it more difficult to solve issues I care about. That's the reason I hate the Black Lives Matter movement. I care about decreasing police violence, but they've completely hijacked that issue and made it about race. My worry is that if Sargon becomes somewhat successful with this activism, it will actually make it harder for other people to solve these problems. See, Sargon isn't a respected intellectual, businessman, or otherwise upstanding member of society. He's a dude with a YouTube channel. Outside of his community, he's not going to be treated with any kind of respect, and because he's based his movement entirely on himself, it's only going to get the respect that he gets. So, if they get enough name recognition, the next thing you know, anyone who talks about the same things as Sargon is going to be called a liberalist, whether they want to be in his movement or not. And then Sargon might get invited to talks and debates, and when he does poorly or he's laughed at, it weakens everyone who talks about the same things as him. See, until now, Sargon was just Sargon, and anyone who called him a group leader had nothing concrete to base it on. Now, anyone can rightly claim that Sargon is the leader of the skeptic community, or whatever you want to call it, and a movement based on Sargon is not one I really want representing the interests of everyone opposed to SJWs. So it's not really that I think the ideals behind this activist movement are bad. I don't really know exactly what all their principles are, and if I knew them, I might agree with a lot of them. But I don't think an activist movement centered around a guy with a YouTube channel is the best way to solve the problems in society. In fact, I think it might actually make things worse. I think Sargon would be much more effective at changing things in society by continuing to do what he's doing. Make videos, change minds, and maybe over time society will become ready for a strong, naturally forming movement based on classical liberal principles. I just don't think this is the way to do it, and I'm not sure Sargon is the right person to lead it. But I'm just one person, and I'm curious to know what you think. So until next time, I'm Positive Improvement, and I wish you all the best.